We already know many of the reasons why our students do not graduate from high school. Lack of support and resources, not enough emphasis on mentoring, classes so large teachers have trouble remembering their students' names, budgets so small teachers have to pay for supplies from their own pockets. Everyone pointing fingers when our children do not succeed, and few stepping up to help our children do their best. That's where we begin. The good men and women of Detroit have said enough. We must do something. The line in the sand has been drawn. Today, we're focused on what we can do. Today, we stop the blame game, the finger pointing, and the empty promises. We begin right now to share what we can do to make positive change. We cannot wait 10 or 20 years for societal or attitude shifts. Nothing short of the future of America is at stake.
American Graduate Teacher Town Halls are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and are part of American Graduate Let's Make It Happen, a public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
My elementary experience was, I'll say it was brutal at times. I had to deal with teasing and people picking on me. I was being bullied so much in middle school that I was just not concentrating on the work. I was concentrating on being what everybody wanted me to be.
I was hanging out with the wrong group of people, and most of them smoked and most of them did a lot of bad things, and they would peer pressure me into doing all those bad things.
I have heard the statistic rating of our graduation. I have heard statistics of how many of us end up in jail. I don't want to be a statistic. I know that sounds a little cliche but really, I don't want to be a statistic. I want to be different.
Let's be clear here. We're not going to alter the course of education in one teacher town hall or with one discussion. But big changes can happen over time, step by step, if everyone takes full responsibility for the health and safety of our students. That means you who are watching this program and the folks in our studio audience. More than 100 teachers are sitting here in our audience. This is a tiny subset of the thousands of teachers, counselors, principals, mentors, and other educational support that work on solutions every day. And each of us in this room, each of us watching, has been encouraged by at least one person to shoot for our dreams. Remember that as we proceed in this discussion. Our job tonight is to find ways to help our children shoot for their dreams. What can we do now to help them? We all have a stake in this, and it's up to us as adults to model what we want to see in our future leaders. Joining me tonight as our polling anchor and to help further the conversation is Donald Walker, Director of Production and Education at WRCJ Radio. He's got a much better voice than me, and that's why he gets that job. Also joining the conversation is our group of panelists. Jordan Peschke is a teacher at Lawton Elementary School in Ann Arbor. Narmeen Razaki is the teacher at the University Preparatory Academy in Detroit. Omari Lewis is the teacher at the University Preparatory Science and Math Middle School in Detroit, and Paul Gaubinski is a business management, marketing, and technology teacher at Oakland School's Technical Campus in Royal Oak. And I will continue extending his title by saying he's the Teacher of the Year. Thanks for all of you for being with us tonight. So, Paul, first question I have from the audience already. I'm going to be kind of juggling things here. Some questions that we already have, some questions that'll come up. You're the Teacher of the Year. What do you think can be done to reduce the dropout rate?
Well, I think one of the key elements as we look at it, I actually represent the career and technical education component of our whole system in education. And I think a lot of times the key elements for students, and studies show, is the hands-on learning, the project-based learning that we're able to have our students work within our programs through career and technical education. And I think one of the bigger issues too is working in an and solution as opposed to an either or. I think obviously as we're able to marry the academics with those hands-on opportunities for our students, I have a colleague of mine who says, you know, students learn from their fingertips backward. And so when you look at that and they're in those opportunities to learn where they're engaged, it's in something that's relevant for them, they're applying all of the areas of knowledge that they've learned, and we're able to bring that together through some of those projects that they're working on, I think that certainly is a step in the right direction to have young people want to come to school, want to apply, and want to demonstrate what they're able to do with their knowledge.
So how do you make it relevant from outside, from what you're teaching them in the classroom to how they take it home with them, or how they take it to a job or someplace else in their life?
I think math is everywhere. I'm a math teacher, and the fact that math is everywhere, it's very easy to go on a walking trip and have your kids find the height of a tree given a right triangle using the Pythagorean theorem. I just learned that with my algebra kids. So I think the fact that it is so prevalent out there, and you don't necessarily have to go outside to experience the realness of math, but just giving them exploration so that they can develop the concepts instead of you just telling them.
Okay, Amari, how about you? How do you make it relevant?
Well, being a math teacher as well, I mean, math is definitely all around us, but to piggyback off what Paul said about project-based learning, I mean, it's so important, to have those kids really interested in a project, that really connects the math and the real world connection as well. And really it does, those project-based learning activities, they really do connect, and the kids internalize it, and they actually, somehow, say, hey, it makes sense now, and it just really builds. It really builds on where they need to go, and kind of almost they're looking at it like this is my future. This could be this could be my future career. And that's really the best way to teach, is to have them really internalize and really to make that connection.
You're, relatively speaking, the greenest in the room, so to speak. So
Yes.
what are you seeing? What are the folks who are helping you learn how to become a teacher? What do they tell you that's working, and what are you seeing in your classroom?
Yeah, and to kind of clear up my intro, I'm a student teacher right now at Lawton Elementary School. I'm studying elementary education at the University of Michigan, working in a second grade class.
Okay.
So the things that we're talking about how to make teaching relevant and how to make those experiences for kids, is really exactly what Paul was talking about fingertips backwards, about engaging kids in that first part of a lesson to get them excited about what you're talking about, then creating an experience for them to really build upon, and then working back from there. Having discussion about what just happened, what did we just do, what are we taking away from that? And it's not what you want them to take away, but we can guide them in a way where they can find and come to those conclusions themselves, and really creating an experience where students can then be guided to find those lessons, those ideas, those concepts that you want them to take away.
Okay, so throughout the evening today, we're trying to figure out a way that we can arm the teachers in this room, and perhaps the teachers that are watching us online, with some sort of tools that they can really start to pick up on and do on Monday or Tuesday. Something that doesn't cost us an arm and a leg. I can't decrease class sizes. I can't give you extra teacher's assistants. I can't do all of this. But what are some things that you have done in each of your classrooms, and we'll go around here, that you've seen it's an incredibly low cost and high yield technique or tactic? We'll start with you.
I think the key element, and we've really been able to do this within my school system and at Oakland Schools, is, we've turned to teacher leadership. We've really gone in and dealt with collaboration, and we're dealing with best practices. And, we all bring certain skill sets to our classrooms, and when you can combine that with ideas and concepts and methods that maybe somebody else has utilized and been successful, you really then can grow that synergy between and amongst teachers, but more importantly, the students. So I think that collaboration component is what's working and why. I think we have to be able to allow sometimes for dialogue to occur. So often we are in our classrooms with our students and trying to move forward and meet all the mandates and the requirements and those types of things. But I also look at it as a reflective piece. If we're able to step back and work together and say, this is what's working for me, let's share those experiences, because the students are the ones that will benefit.
To piggyback off of what Paul said, being open to, trying something and sticking to it consistently to see if it'll actually work. I think often as teachers, we'd like to try a single strategy to hit everyone, but with our ever-changing world of education and all the learners we come into contact with, I feel like the only way you could address all the varying needs is by collaborating and being open to the practices, even though you maybe yourself didn't come up with them.
So how do you end up creating almost an individualized lesson plan for 30 students at once?
I think in math it helps, for your auditory learners, if you do a quick mini lesson, they grasp it. For your visual learners, whatever you're writing on the board. For your tactile learners, bringing in manipulatives. So, just a very quick example, combining like terms. If you have popsicle sticks and poker chips and, the kids actually see and can touch that. Before I wanted to add 2 popsicle sticks and 2 poker chips, but they're not the same thing. So that's, from my personal experience, how I've incorporated it.
So this just costs popsicle sticks and poker chips. That's
Yeah,
pretty low
dollar
cost.
store is my best friend.
That's not an endorsement. They're not a sponsor of the program, just so you know. But they could be. I mean, we're open to that. How about you?
I think in elementary school we think about so much more than the academic success of a child. We really think about what it means to become an independent individual. So we're thinking about their social well-being, their mental, their spiritual well-being. But I feel like that can slowly fall away in middle and high school. And we can become so focused on that academic, and we want the best for all those other areas, but we sometimes don't have that time to grasp those areas. But in the elementary classroom, we're thinking about it so much, and so thinking about how can we carry that into our middle and our high school classrooms? How can we do things as teachers to really touch those other parts of those individuals, of those students? And so an example that I have that I've used in both the elementary and the middle school classroom is kids want to talk, they want to socialize, they want to hear what their peers have to say, and hearing that need and seeing that need as myself and meeting them halfway on that. So when they come into class and I'm sitting there trying to teach a lesson and they are not focused because they want to talk to their friends, I saw that need right away. And I thought, what am I going to do about this? So I was working with a group of 6th graders, and they would come in to class and they weren't ready ever to work. And I saw that need and I thought, I got to give them that time to socialize. And I know that time is so, so precious. And so I would turn on a song on my iPod. It'd be about 3 minutes, and that would be their time. If you wanted to talk, you wanted to go to the bathroom, you wanted to sharpen your pencil, do what you need to do to get ready for class. The minute, that second that the music stops, we're ready, we're on, we're ready to go. I saw a need that they wanted to socialize, that they needed that to be prepared for class, and I gave them that outlet, and I met them halfway on that. I gave them that time, and I had to give up something, but they gained something from that. So it's seeing that need and meeting them halfway, and just that little bit was an outlet to get them ready.
Amari, is she being too optimistic? Is it if you turn music on in your class, would they ever come back to?
I actually do a little bit more than that. I have a burp and fart piano application. And
application.
Yeah, and yeah.
There's an app for that.
Yeah, it's an app for that. And I do that just to break the monotony. But I'm also a stickler for time. So my goal is to at least get 4 to 5 activities. So I'm constantly timing them for each activity, letting them know that there is structure, there is an agenda that has to be completed. So there's 3 strategies that I really use. I break up the content. I break up the curriculum in small chunks for every lesson. And I really, my goal right now as a middle school teacher is to move them from arithmetic way of thinking to an algebraic way of thinking. So I'm constantly building on those arithmetic skills. So I give them time tests, and time is such a huge issue. You only give an hour, so you gotta plug it in there. So I use small chunks. I use a timer, and I use storytelling. So I let them know who I am by telling them my experiences as a middle school teacher, as a middle school student back when I was in middle school. And some of the stories are false, but
they might be watching.
if they're watching, they know. I always started off, 1978,
Right.
and they all Mr. Lewis, But it just breaks that.
Yeah.
It breaks it up. Allows me to hit some social points but come back to the curriculum and plug them hard.
So we're also, for the audience at home can't participate in this, but the audience here in the studio have these little remote controls and these clickers, and we're going to ask a few poll questions with this sample of teachers while we have them here. So I've got one question about teacher class size, or student class sizes, and we'll put that up in a second. And this was one of, is there a direct correlation between small class sizes and higher achievement? So for you in the audience, if it's yes, press 1. If it's no, press 2. If you're undecided, press 3. But go ahead and decide, really. It's not that big of a question. So you're anonymous. You can say it how you want, and we'll get those results to the audience at home in a bit here. But a lot of these teachers filled out a survey before they came here, and what's interesting is that 18% of you said that you had students, less than 20 students in your class. 40% of you, the bulk of you, said that you're teaching classes of 26 to 30. And what was fascinating to me is 24%, a quarter of you said greater than 31 kids are in your classroom today. And if you follow the news in Detroit, you know that just a couple of weeks ago at Nolan Elementary School, the fire marshal handed out a code violation because I think there were 50 students in a classroom. A member of your school board wrote to the ACLU and might have launched an investigation complaining that there were more than 45 students in one of the other classrooms, and I think it was in a particular Academy of the Americas. Now, DPS has said that there is no overcrowding problem and that the claims are erroneous. Let's go ahead and get the results from this poll. And for that, Don, what's the answer?
They just took it
was
away
there.
from me?
It was a tease, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
All right, well, once they get the numbers back up, we'll come back to you, Don.
Okay.
But it's really, and the teachers in the room, please, if you've got something to share and if you have a question, go ahead and step up to the podium and we'll. Did they get the results back or not yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. All right. So about class sizes, again, this is something that's far beyond an average teacher's control. If you are in a classroom where you feel outnumbered almost, that you cannot give the type of attention that you feel your students need, what do you do? I mean, how do you figure this out? And how do you grapple with this, Paul?
Well, certainly when we look at how we're able to meet the students' needs. I mean, when we look at differentiated learning, as we had mentioned, the different style learnings that we have that are in there, we have to address those. Because if we're just going to kind of shoot for the middle, and then you're going to have some outliers here and some outliers here, and we're going to call that good enough, that's not working. Mm-hmm. Very difficult, though, then with limited teachers in the classrooms to meet each of one of those individual needs. I think a lot of things also have to be, so being in the classroom and working with that's a daunting task. Mm-hmm. And it is one where teachers really have to work extremely hard to meet those individual needs. But they also have to have partners in that. And that needs to be the community and that needs to be the home. And so then when you're able to do that, you can also then work in a balance. It doesn't eliminate that there's 40 young people sitting in there. But when you're working with that, we need to engage community and partnership and parental involvement as well to help them move through that so that they then can help fill in some of those things that we may not be able to do right there in the classroom at that point in time.
Okay. Don, what are the results up there?
Well, the question was, is there a direct correlation between the small class sizes and higher achievement? 85% say yes, 7% say no, and 9% say that they're not sure. Glad to see that number, though. As a parent, it's something I look for, especially with my youngest daughter as we're preparing her for first grade. I do look for schools that have small class sizes because I'm concerned about that kind of thing.
Sure, that makes sense. I think most parents are. All right, we've got another quick video for you to check out here.
I can tell you, my math teacher, for instance, at my previous school, she didn't care about how the class was being run. She'd walk out of the class for hours on end and then come back in like nothing was wrong.
One kid came up to me and he handed me marijuana in a can, and I put it in my pocket. He just said, "Hold on to it." And so I was kicked out of school for 3 months, and I tried to go back, and I just started failing because I didn't know anything. I was just failed that entire year.
My zeal for education was lost because of a comment that was made by one of my previous teachers. The exact comment was, whether you pass or fail, I will get paid. It doesn't matter if you come to school, it doesn't matter if you do your work. And I lost it. I said, well, fine. I don't have to come to school. I can stay home. I can go skip. I can go to the mall. I can go hang with my friends.
I mean, she is really just talking directly about motivation in some ways. You know, she's really just trying to reach out. And what's fascinating to me is that these students are able to articulate themselves in a way that sometimes, is it because we as parents or as teachers are not listening, or are they saying something that's new and profound here? I mean, what are you hearing, Omari, from your students similar to what she's talking about?
Well, the fact is, I mean, they have a invested interest, you know, and I mean, I've heard that phrase before while I was in school. You know, the teacher says, "I can get paid, you know, whether you learn or not." You know, and I know how that feels, and I know that no student needs to hear it. And I think it kind of goes back to the project-based learning, where the kids need that piece that pulls them into who they're supposed to be in life, you know. And if they can find an interest project that really grabs hold of them, you know, I mean, that could build their career. That could build who they are.
We can take questions from the audience if any of you have them. Just go ahead and stick your hand up, and one of the runners here, go ahead, step up.
Good evening. It has been said that students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And this can be answered by any of the panelists. How important do you think teaching core values is in the schools today? Teaching, taking responsibility for your own actions, loving yourself and others. How important are those core values in making sure that students learn your curriculum when they know how important those core values are to you and to themselves? Intrinsic motivation is the key to all of our students learning any subject. And so how important is bringing core value education into schools today so that students succeed?
Narmeen, let's start with you.
I'd say it's extremely important. It's stuff that in our advisory program we work on. I think the one difficulty is, you know, I think we forget that we're all partners in educating children. And so teachers during the school day, we play that part. And I think if all the players in the picture, teachers, parents, and the larger community, all together communicated that consistent message of, you know, all the ideals Ms. Tomlinson spoke about, I think we'd get a far greater return. We'd see drastic improvements in our students' performances.
Paul, what about those fundamentals?
Fundamentals are critical because you first have to establish that relationship. There has to be that trust that they know that you have their best interest in mind and that you're there as the leader in that classroom going to be able to move them where they need to go. And I think when you establish that, and we've all had opportunities to do that, we all have stories to share where we've been able to make that connection and see just how powerful it is. I think sometimes too we may underestimate just how powerful our actions and what our words may be for a young person, whether it's at the elementary level or at the high school level. And I think the point made earlier, we know what happens at the elementary. I'm teaching juniors and seniors at the technical campus. They still want that same feel good. They still want to be valued, and not only for what they're able to do, but who they are as a person. And you have to get to know them. What are their extracurriculars they're involved in? What is it that is going on in their community that's important? And when you can do that, now we're a team. Everybody's on the same page, and then they'll be able to follow you where you want to lead them. But more importantly, you can learn from them as well. I think sometimes we don't give young people enough credit for what they are able to do and their thoughts. How do we do that? We give them time and space related to what it is that we're trying to teach and weave that in there. but you have to lead by modeling.
Jordan?
And I think piggybacking off of what you just said, Paul, about those feel-good messages, to be explicit with them, to not be afraid to say, I'm your friend, I care about you, I want to help you do those things. I'm working with a mentor teacher now, Susan Bailey, who is extremely passionate about her work and about working with children and making them feel good. And I've so quickly noticed with her how explicit she is with saying those things. You know, with quickly saying, I care for you. I want you to get better at this. This is why we're working on it. And not being afraid to be explicitly saying that to students, no matter how old they are, whether they're 6 or they're 16, to be clear with them. Because sometimes I think as adults we assume that they can just infer by these mixed messages that we send, or we think we're saying one thing with how we're acting or what the words we're using, but being explicit about what you mean, that I do care for you, I want you to do well, and I'm here to help you get to where you want to be.
I have a question.
All the things that you're saying are absolutely things that I feel in my heart. I think we all do. The problems that I have with my students in terms of getting them to graduate is getting them to school. I have problems with transportation. They can't get there. They can take the city buses. They can't get there. The buses run late. They don't have the money. Their parents don't have the money. They have to get jobs. They have all these other things. All these things are great once you get them into the building. But they don't miss school because they don't want to be there most of the time. They miss school because their parents are keeping them home, or they miss school because they can't get to school. And that's a problem that I'd love to find some more solutions for.
So, Amari, how about that transportation issue?
It is an issue in the city of Detroit. Just recently, it wasn't a strike, but it was an issue with bus safety.
Yeah.
Bus driver safety. It's a huge issue. I mean, even at the middle school level, I may have maybe 15 kids coming in on time. You know, so you know we do have a buffer, a 30-minute buffer at our school where we are allowing those kids to come in late. You know, because it is a commuter school. You know, so I think maybe the administration may have to put those buffers in place where, you know, giving kids, you know, that time to, you know, come in late. But those kids who are just not coming, I mean, there has to be something put in place where parents have to be held accountable, you know, for not allowing their children to come to school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean that's a serious issue.
So what happens on Monday? I mean, how do we don't have an extra fleet of buses to get her kids or his kids into the classroom on time. What's something that a teacher can do to try to help this situation? Narmeen?
I mean, we have students who, will give them money for the bus. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a short-term solution.
Right.
I mean, given that it's such a prevalent problem, maybe school budgets should set aside some money where they have a small school bus that,
Mm-hmm.
Personally picks up those kids who have trouble.
Paul, how'd you deal with that situation?
Well, certainly, as you said, it's not going to be solved on the Monday, but the conversation that's there, and it's in anything that you're looking at, you have to have a champion. And if that champion is in place in your district, whether it's administration, whether it's the teacher, whether it's the partnership to figure out how are we going to get these young people there. Technology is an opportunity, but not everybody has equal access to technology. So you have another barrier or challenge to work with. But when you look at some of those barriers, I mean, none of those are insurmountable. But it's a matter of a champion and somebody making it a priority. Mm-hmm. And, it's just as if we're here this evening. There was made a priority to have this discussion. And so now we need to continue and follow through with that to see if we can tackle some of these very difficult situations. Because as you said, there's not extra buses going to show up on Monday, and there's not a large pile of money that's going to be available to make that happen. But we have to connect with the right people and move this forward. And, we as educators, that may be a responsibility that we have to take a look at. We've got 1,000 things we already have to do. People will agree with that. But if that's what we're doing, is educating our next generation so that we have independently thinking and independently functioning adults at the end of our system, then that may be something we have to add to the plate.
Are there carpool lists that you can start? Are there websites that help figure out which kids are next to each other and how they could get here any faster? I mean, are there any kind of Are there any technology tools today that help you surmount this problem? I think there's a business opportunity here. If anybody's watching, if there isn't one.
That's a great idea. But parents, they definitely carpool.
Yeah.
That's definitely happening.
Sir, you've got a question.
Project-based learning, differentiated instruction. Use them all. Sounds wonderful. Here's my problem. I have a middle school class. I teach middle school social studies. I see an average of 32, 33 students each hour. I believe in immediate feedback to the students. I was a little disappointed to hear you say, sir, that DPS said overcrowding wasn't a problem. Every teacher in here would agree that immediate feedback is very important to students. So at the end of the day, when I see about 180 students, and I want them to have immediate feedback to what they do, whether it's their project, whether it's differentiated instruction, how can I give them that immediate feedback for them to continue their project, to know what they did wrong, to know what they did right? It is virtually impossible if I'm not there 24 hours a day, checking papers after I leave, and then having all this ready for them the next day when I get back to school.
I think specifically in math, giving that instant feedback, I use whiteboards in my classroom. So throw up a problem, the students complete it, and then they reveal their answers, and it's at a quick glance you can see who gets it, who doesn't, and then when they work into their group time, you can troubleshoot through the kids who were struggling. So that's something specifically in math that would work. As for social studies, I would leave it to some of my other colleagues to address that.
Amari?
I'm a math teacher as well.
Right.
So immediate feedback is something that I don't have to worry about. I also teach in a classroom of 15, so I'm constantly going around looking at those scores. But I mean, really, I put the kids to work. I time them. I give them. I put the answer key on the board and pass out the red pens. Exchange papers. They check them. They're very honest with it. I go over it, to keep them honest.
Yeah.
And I make 2 stacks. 1 stack passing, 1 stack failing. I put the percentage of the class for a percentage of passing, and we have a discussion after that. Okay, tell me what went wrong. Tell me, what you're feeling, what happened, and once we get that discussion moving, I mean, not only do I know what their scores are, but they actually get to figure out what their mistakes are, and that's how they're learning as well.
So you tell the classroom in the aggregate what the scores on the test were?
Yes.
Right away?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's time for our second poll question here. The question is, are elementary school teachers adequately prepared to teach math and science to their students? So if you're here in the room, 1 is yes and 2 is no. Again, the question is, are elementary school teachers adequately prepared to teach math and science to their students? We'll get those results in a bit. This kind of goes right into where you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of these challenges with math and science that teachers are coming out of school today facing?
I would say math specifically is an area that is highly tested, and it's something that our country looks to see how our students are doing, in the same way that reading is. Science is, in the elementary classroom, pushed to the back burner very quickly, as well as social studies. And so our teachers, I think, are not getting enough in science and math to prepare our students to then move on to middle school and high school. They'll be taking these classes exclusively during that time. I would say what we're doing at the University of Michigan to help teachers feel more comfortable in teaching those subject matters is experience right away. In our 2-year program, we are in the classroom at least 2 days a week for the entire 2 years that we're there. We are trying out lessons. We are writing them with professors and with colleagues at the university. We get to rehearse them, which is always a funny thing to do with adults, and try them out. And sometimes they're great, and sometimes they bomb. But we get to bring them back to the classroom and talk to experienced educators and young educators about what we did right, what we did wrong, what we can change for next time, and what we learned about it. And so I think that those struggles that we're facing in math and science that we maybe don't feel as comfortable teaching, we are overcoming those in teacher education. And through experience, we're learning so that first time we're not in the classroom, that's not the first time it bombs. It's when we were learning how to do it.
Right.
That's when it bombs.
Right. Practice, practice, practice.
Yes.
So, results, Don?
Are elementary school teachers adequately prepared to teach math and science to their students? 34% say yes, 38% say no, and 28% are not sure. I think this is a real interesting set of numbers because the method of teaching math has so radically changed from when I was a child. As a parent, I couldn't tell you whether or not that teacher was teaching my child the correct way myself.
Right. Right, and then it's until you sit down to do homework with them, and all of a sudden you're lost. All right, so we've got another small video here, and I think the audience will be able to see it this time too.
I believe teachers are supposed to be, you know, school parents, basically. You have to say, okay, well, you know, I don't appreciate that you're picking with this student. You know, you need to stop that. That's not fair. Address the issue. Don't just look at the issue like, well, it's not my problem. You're not my kid.
When they see a student is struggling or doesn't understand the work, come up to them and say, come to me after class. You know, pull them aside. Don't make it public. Do this in private. That way, that student feels like you're talking to me and not put me on the spot in front of the whole entire class.
You have to care about your students, you know. You have to ask, like, you know, okay, well, you know, is everybody okay today? And the students will be more engaged. They'll say, wow, this is awesome. She's asking me how I'm doing, and she's teaching me.
I feel like when you have somebody that's there that wants you to succeed, that's what keeps me motivated. Like, I never cared for algebra, and now I can go up to the board and write down the answers to my teacher's problem without him helping.
Every child, every person is different. You have to choose a different method. I believe that's the best way because it works for me, and I believe it could work for others.
I mean, it's interesting that he's resonating some of the same things you're saying, that it's not going to be a blanket solution for every kid in your classroom. But as a teacher, how do you figure out, are there groups of students that you can say, okay, it looks like these are auditory learners, these are tactile learners, and let's figure out some sort of a lesson plan? How do you do that? Amari, start with you.
You definitely want to start off with some hands-on activities. And from there, you can really gauge and see who are your auditory, who are your kinesthetic, you know, and really, from there, you can group your kids.
Is that what you've done, Paul?
Well, I think anytime that you're working with this and you're building work groups and teams, it's important as those roles develop that they're able to identify some of those areas that they have their strengths in, and they can work together. We as teachers all have our strengths, and I'm very fortunate. We work at a technical campus, and I teach with two other gentlemen within our lab. And obviously, the three of us together, students have an opportunity to interact. It's a very unique situation. It's a technical campus that we're working on, but we're able to play off of each other's strengths and look at that. So we have a team that they see of what's happening, and then we can emulate that when we put our students in their groups for their projects. And I think that that's important. And I think the other thing that the gentleman mentioned about, so where do we go from here with the project base? I think that that is something where our professional development needs to also address that. I mean, it was stated here, I don't have an answer right this evening to solve that issue because he has a lot on the plate. We all have a lot on the plate. But where do we provide resources so that we can learn something to maybe help expedite what's happening traditionally to move it in and do that so he can give them the feedback? I think those are some of the things where we talk about them, but then we still got to have a champion to figure out what direction are we going to go and how are we going to provide some possible solutions. And I think that's important. I don't want that to be missed, you know, when we do that. We didn't solve it right here amongst us, and there may be some people in the audience that might be able to speak and do that. But it's about sharing, and it's about trying to find the resources to find a solution for that. Because obviously, it's a teacher that cares, wants the feedback for the students, just we need to look at some options and some alternatives to do that. So I think that's important.
A question at the podium?
I think it's very important, and I'm sure we all agree, to know what students think. Student voice leads to student empowerment, and that's the key. We can't create the solutions without them, because how will we know that it'll even work? We can think it's the greatest thing, but what do the young people think? So in your classrooms, what opportunities are there for students to have a voice in the classroom instruction, how things are going to go? What percentage or what opportunities are there for them to talk to you about the class versus coming after school or things like that? Does your school have a policy? How can students share their ideas? Because as we know, even in math, some kids are going to be definitely afraid of it. Some are going to excel. I mean, they can even work together potentially and come up with ideas of community within the classroom. So I guess my question is, how do you empower your students in your classrooms to express their opinion?
Jordan, are you crowdsourcing lesson plans, and are they telling you where to go?
I think that's a great question. And just listening to that video, that was an opportunity for those students to share what they were thinking. Just saying, if a teacher says this to me, I will feel this way. And so I think creating positions to empower students is so important. And I find myself having those kinds of discussions with kids when a problem or a question comes up in the classroom, and maybe I have an idea about what I would say, but I try to carve out a little bit of time to say, well, what do you all think? If a kid the other day asked me, in the elementary setting, if they could take a book out to recess. And in my mind, I'm thinking, I want you to play. I don't really want you to read at recess. But I think, all right, let me ask you all, what do you think? What do you think our policy should be in our classroom about if you can do this? And I think that can easily be brought into many other contexts, so that when a student has a question, maybe a kind of a logistical question or something about the culture of your classroom, asking them what you think. But you have to be open when you ask them for what they're going to say, and be prepared for what they're going to say. And it might not be what you want to hear. And so choosing those opportunities wisely about what is really open for interpretation and discussion in your classroom. I think that was a great question.
So how democratic can it actually be? At some point, you're going to have to say, we're not going to have recess for 6 hours today.
Well, I think if you present them with reasonable options, kind of like, if someone's not working, do you want to work now or do you want to work during lunch? And lunch is social hour, so they'll choose to work right then and there. I think specifically in my classroom, the kids feel empowered because I've implemented classroom jobs, which I'm sure many of us do, but like a class captain who's in charge of getting the class started, making sure their homework's out, a homework stamper to make sure their homework's done, and the administrative piece of making sure everyone's homework's done, I'm walking around troubleshooting to make sure that the kids who didn't understand the homework, I can actually use that time to help kids who had trouble with the homework, instead of, being like, you did it, you did it, you did it. While walking around, I can glance and I pretty much know who's done it and who has not. Also, the empowerment piece, giving students the small successes. So asking questions or, asking them questions they'll get right, to kind of build up their confidence, so that when you pose them with more challenging questions, they're open to even attempting it and feeling comfortable. Like, we all mistakes. I deliberately will make mistakes so they can catch it, so that they realize, like, we're all human.
That's a great idea. Go ahead.
I just have a couple of comments. First of all, I think that as teachers in this room, we know that we are not in our profession for the money, and we are not in our profession for the glory. But we all love what we do, and we're here because we're passionate about our students and their success. The question that I have it pertains to keeping high-quality teachers, particularly in the profession, but particularly in the high-need districts. I currently work in a charter school in Highland Park, which is an under-resourced part of the city. As a charter school, we are not unionized, so there are no pay raises. Of course, no teacher gets paid well ever, but not according to other professions and what experience will get you there. We have grueling hours. We have limited parent involvement in the school that I'm in. We have some parents who are really great, and then we have a whole lot who don't know how to support their student academically, never mind socially. We have under-resourced classrooms that I could list on and on
Right.
and on the problems. My question is, how do you keep people who are passionate about education and passionate about meeting the needs of young people in classrooms where they're not going to get any financial benefit. It's not always going to feel good, and it's just a hard job. So how can we engage a new crop of people and keep them there for longer than the 5 years that most of them drop out after being in districts like that?
Okay. Yeah. Paul, why have you stuck with it?
Great question. Yes, I think a lot of it has to do with the school culture, in who is in your building, leadership in your building, but also the teachers. I mean, we have to own what's happening in there, and then you become that support group. We know how difficult it is to be in there day in and day out. And I think a lot of times, part of it is a societal piece. You know, education, as in other countries, being an educator may looked upon as a higher profession than it may be here within the United States. But when we're in here, we have a wonderful group here that are willing to do this, and we know why we're doing it. So I don't want to oversimplify it, but I mean, we all know what our school cultures are like. Start there and say, is this school culture supporting me and us so that we can continue to do that? So when a young person does come in, they now feel that this is my home away from home, because we know we're there a lot of hours, right? And no one will deny that. But I think that that's the part of the piece that's there. And I think sometimes we have to provide some of those own little pick-me-up moments amongst ourselves. We have to recognize that somebody down the hall just did a great job. It could be as simple as a little note, a quick text. I mean, you know, we live in a 140-character world now and 7-second sound bites.
Right.
But that's, you know, where we're at. So I think that's very important, is that we, as a family, we talk about family engagement. That's where we need to be in terms of our school system.
And I'm going to go ahead and add this polling question in. This is our third one, and then this actually dovetails perfectly out of the comment that she just made. If we can see that question up there, it's basically, will our education improve if teacher salaries went up? I mean, if this is one of the things that our teachers are thinking about, will the quality of education improve if we increase teacher salaries? If you think yes, press 1. If you say no, press 2. If you're undecided about it, probably time for a different profession. That's press 3. So we'll get those in a moment. So, but before I get to you, so how do you change that culture? If you know that culture is not supportive, the school that you walk back into, what can each of you do, or what can any of these teachers do?
Be a factor of change by organizing with teachers at that school. You know, just being the best you can be. Even looking for grants. You know, there are options out there, but we do know what we stepped into when we chose this profession. You know, there's no glory. You know, unless you're in the classroom and you can actually see it. You know, but outside the classroom, I mean, everyone has an opinion. Everyone's been taught before, so they all have an opinion. You know, I can do your job. You shouldn't get paid that much. You shouldn't have, you know, summers off. Right. But there is a need. I mean, it's a calling for what we do, and a lot of times we're paid back just by seeing the change in those kids.
I mean, the other woman also asked an interesting question, which was, how do we prevent the teacher dropout crisis at the 5-year point? You know, what's going to convince you to keep doing this for 10, 15, 20 years like some of these folks in the audience?
So I'm currently at my 5-year mark, well, a little bit over, so far so good. I think what helps is working under great leadership, and at University Prep Science and Math Middle School, we have great administrators who are willing to listen to what we need to get the job done, to best support us in whatever way possible. And I think it helps that, you know, they were educators themselves, so they understand the plight that we face. I think something as simple as recognizing the good work that teachers do, the great work that they do, and acknowledging the fact that they bring such a unique set of skills that everyone doesn't possess, because if everyone possessed them, everyone would be rushing to become a teacher.
Great. Now we've got another a video here that we want to have you take a look at.
I have had grades that I have not been satisfied with, and I improved those by having teachers who cared enough about me to want to help me in their class, so I can improve to what I wanted. I always wanted A. I always wanted all A's are report card.
I would say my counselor helped me to get where I am now. She went out of her way to make sure that I would pass. I feel like I have my own control, I have my own leadership. I care more about my future.
In this school where I'm at now, the teachers are actually speaking with the students. That's why I've actually fully regained my zeal to learn. Like, I don't even want to skip anymore. I love doing my work. I love doing my work.
We've got the results back from our question. Don?
I'm really surprised by these numbers. Will the quality of education improve if we increase teachers' salaries? 50% say yes, no surprise. 35% say no, and 15% say not sure. And the 35% is very surprising because as a parent and obviously as a former student, I recognize the importance of teachers in the lives of us as children and as parents. I turn my child over to a teacher for 8-9 hours out of the day. Why wouldn't I want to see that individual be paid large sums of money to attract the best individual into that situation to take care of my next generation?
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's fascinating though also that there's 35% of you in the crowd said that money's not necessarily the answer either. That there's a lot more. You know, we've generated some notes just from this evening's conversation. We'll put all of them online for you to take a look at, but we really wanted to try to figure out some of these solutions that teachers can take back on Monday. And so let me go through a couple of them with you. It was popsicle sticks and poker chips, right? Relatively low cost, high yield, kind of tactile learning, hands-on and project-based learning that you were talking about as well, giving students an opportunity to explore and learn concepts, giving them a connection from what's being learned in the classroom with some real-life experiences as well. So we'll get to a couple more of these. I want to go ahead and get your comment in right now.
Hi. Just a quick question. I'm on both sides of the fence. I'm a parent who sends their child to a school district in the city of Detroit, and then I'm also a city of Detroit teacher. On one hand, I spend a tremendous amount of time in my day with students who are at risk in a community who is well underserved, who have limited resources. And but then on the other side of the fence, I spend a tremendous amount of time with my own child, right, who I take to a classroom that's overcrowded because I don't have a lot of choices as a teacher. Yep. Because of my income, because of my pay cuts, because of the requirements I still have to meet as a student, myself as a lifelong student, right, who on the average pays $3,000 per semester for college classes, on top of all the pay cuts. So I'm not complaining. I don't think that teachers signed up to be poor or be in poverty or not, or have to choose when they're grocery shopping what they will buy for their own family. I believe that we have to have some empathy, but then on the other side of that, we have to have common sense. Sure. And while we're saving other children, we have to be able to save and feed our own as well. So I don't think that any teacher is looking for to be rich or to drive a Benz or anything like that, but we would like to drive a car that works. Right.
Right. So that you can get to class on time, not just the school buses.
And we want to be able to get our children on to school on time and those other things. Okay. So it's a give and take.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So some more of these solutions that we were talking about, teacher leadership collaboration with other teachers, that's been successful for Paul. Look at a student's social, mental, emotional well-being along with just their academic growth, and I think a lot of successful teachers already do that. Bringing core values back into the classroom by teacher examples. Amari had mentioned that he shares some of his fictitious and otherwise sometimes truthful stories about his life in middle school as well. And you also talked about a little bit of that, making sure that you perhaps made a mistake and they could catch you on it. That's not something that's kind of intuitive to it, but I suppose that I totally get why that would work. And then a focus on the fundamentals, that the teacher has to form a trust between themselves and students. I mean, these are all relatively things that, again, are not going to cost you money, that you don't have to go tackle a bureaucratic system of a principal or counselor or whatever. These are hopefully the tips that you can take on your own and implement. You've got to sort of lead by modeling. That was another thing that we heard here. And getting immediate feedback by writing on blackboards. That was kind of an interesting idea, that collectively showing them that, hey, the majority of you passed this test, or the majority of you didn't, and why. That's kind of an interesting notion too. Something that I saw just in the last couple of days, and I could do a poll about it, but just in your own minds, ask yourselves, when was the last time you called a student's parent? Was it to tell them about their success, or was it to tell them about their failure? And think about what kind of paradigm shift it would be if you called them because their kids were doing something great today. So it's really, there's so much of it out there that we can do. And that's kind of bringing this to a little bit of a close. So the American Graduate Project is not limited to Detroit. There will be town hall meetings like this all over the country. This was a great discussion, but it's only the beginning. So where do we go from here? What's the next step? Not just for educators, but for all of us. I want to thank our panelists, the teachers in our audience, and our viewers. We're on our way to helping our nation's children shoot for their dreams. We have some ways to keep our students in school and graduating. We'll continue the discussion online right now at miamericangraduate.org. Feel free to add your comments and share your opinions online. While we have to come up with a decent list of solutions that are working for teachers, we can always use yours. Thanks for watching this broadcast, and continue watching online. I'm Hari Sreenivasan.
American Graduate Teacher Town Halls are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and are part of American Graduate Let's Make It Happen, a public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Welcome to the live streaming portion of the Teacher Town Hall. StoryCorps is an independent nonprofit that records, shares, and preserves the stories of our lives. These stories are archived at the Library of Congress, and some are broadcast on NPR. StoryCorps National Teachers Initiative is collaborating with the American Graduate Project to record the stories of teachers nationwide. Early next year, we'll be back in Detroit to record yours. You can find more information at storycorps.org. Now we'll share a story that we hope will resonate with all of you, of a teacher named Al Sadecki and a phone call from a student that made him proud to be a teacher again.
This patient comes in and he's got a benign tumor. It's pushing on his speech area. He can get some words out, but it's almost unintelligible. It's almost like someone's sewing your mouth closed. So I'm talking to his wife, and we tried to lighten up the situation, and they started asking me about myself, and they asked me who inspired me. So, of course, I mentioned you. We have the surgery. He gets a speech back, and he's just excited and happy and crying and wanted to just hug me. And he said, "You make sure you call that teacher. You make sure you thank him." So I called you.
I picked the phone up and you go, "Hey, it's Lee Bono." I said, "Hey, what's going on, man? I haven't heard from you since you were in high school." And you said, "I want to thank you." I was flabbergasted. I said, "Of all the people in your entire career, you want to thank me?" It was the same feeling I had when my kids were born, and I started to cry. Made me feel really important that I had that influence on you. Lately, I almost am afraid to say that I'm a teacher to some people, but I'm not, because you called me. I'm a teacher, and I'm going to help as many people as I can to find their passion too.
All right, so we're back. We're streaming online, and so perhaps you're watching this in real time. Perhaps you're watching an archive of this, but we've been having a great conversation so far with some fabulous teachers here in Detroit. We had a question. Go ahead and come on up. You know, that last thing that I mentioned on the broadcast of like trying to figure out what's that paradigm shift on how we engage parents. It's something that almost 80% of you said in the online surveys as well as in some of these cards. So we'll get to that topic right after this gentleman here.
My question is a statement and a question, so we kind of go back. My statement is that you're talking to a person who dropped out of school, right here, right now. There was a reason why I dropped out of school, because all that stuff I heard about best practices, delivering information, how do you get them involved, manipulatives, it was not meaningful for an African-American male in the 60s. It did not connect. I could not connect. Yes, we had all these skills. We had great teachers in Detroit Public Schools, but they did not reach me because they could not get me motivated to think that there was a future in all the things that you all were saying. I came back to school and became a teacher. I dropped back in, as you say. Vietnam helped, by the way. But you know what I'm saying? But I came back to teaching because of my mother. She was a teacher, and she said we didn't have enough black males in the school system. So I said, okay, Mom, but you know, being a black male, that's not quite good enough. I had black males in my school system. But then something else happened in 1990. African-centered culture. I heard you all speak of culture, the culture of a school. I heard the sister talk about core values, but not core cultural values. We became the parents that dropout students needed in our schools. As an African-centered school, our children flipped the script across the board nationally. I'm a sociologist, so I was in charge of all that data from 1990 to 1999. We became that chartered, Malcolm X, Paul Robeson, Marcus Garvey, we became those schools that changed and made a difference. But then something happened. Somehow or another, the legislation thought that it shouldn't be. And they came and they wiped us out. They've almost destroyed us now. You all talking about changing the culture of education? It starts with every culture that's in here. I'm looking at a whole mass of cultures sitting here now. One size and one educational stream does not fit all. I don't need to hear about George as much as I need to hear about Toussaint Overture. I don't need to hear about other, even if I'm Hispanic, I might want to know about Hernan Cortez and his impact on the Central American people of that time. Teach me meaningful stuff, not just a technique. Teach me something that's gonna make me an African and not an Africate. You see what I'm saying? So it's not just what you give me, it's not the what you give me, because as math teacher, I'm gonna let this go. Math teachers, in my community, I can put 2 and 2 together and come up with 0. Now, can you tell me how that can be done? Because in my community, 2 African-American males coming down one end of the street and 2 African-Americans coming down the other end of the street, that's gang warfare. It will be 0 African-American males by the time they get to the middle of the block.
Right.
So we can do the math, but it has to be meaningful. So what do you think about African-centered? Can we get back to culture? Can we bring the cultural influences back into these children who need their culture?
So how do we make that, how do we make sort of learning relevant to different disenfranchised groups? I mean, it can be African-American children or perhaps whatever groups that are kind of forming, whether it's the LGBT community that now we're kind of listening to and paying attention to with the It Gets Better campaign. But again, how do we figure that out?
Well, I think we need to start with the premise. We only know what we know. And when we start with that premise, there needs to then be that education of ourselves. And we can need to, again, collaborate and connect so that we can have some of those conversations and be able to connect with some of those things. Because obviously our students are the same way. They come to us with the experiences that they have, and we need to try to connect it somehow, some way, and it's the same thing with us. We need to be able to learn how to try to connect with areas that we're not familiar with. Not an easy task, but again, it's a willingness and openness to share and go down the hall or work with somebody so that you have a better understanding. I think that's the biggest thing that I know within my classroom. If I waited and I'm doing technology for me to master every software package there was, my students, they'd still be on typewriters. but we give them a space and a time so that I can facilitate that learning and work with it and try to grow and learn. I think sometimes, you know, we're not always on point and willing to share. And I haven't quite figured that out yet. But sometimes that is a major barrier. And when we can do that, I think we all win.
I mean, just being a Muslim American woman in a classroom with a headscarf on, you obviously represent something that they're not seeing in the rest of their school, perhaps, at least from an instructor or a principal point of view. How do you figure out how to reach perhaps kids that might be marginalized for other reasons?
I mean, I think sharing personal stories, kind of like Omari talked about. I feel like the only way they can relate to you is if you share experiences that they can relate to. I think also being open to the questions that might come up given their knowledge. I think being open to it and kind of just moving forward with that.
Okay. And you know, there's a lot of data on some of these cards, and I just want to say, I mean, whether you hear this from me or somebody else, I mean, just the types of things that just the teachers in this particular room are doing for some of their kids. I mean, I've got stories here of not just giving people rides to school, but some of you are helping them find jobs. Some of you are giving them new clothes. I mean, it's really stirring, and I hope that we figure out ways to try to not just tell these stories that are inspirational for other teachers, but really kind of look at some of the systemic problems that some of these kids face when they walk into your classrooms, and by the time they get there, and when you just read some of these, you just wonder, I'm amazed that they even showed up to school, that even despite all of what they went through, in these cards one says that they slept in an abandoned building in Detroit because there's enough of those, and they're still coming to class, and you're helping them try to get a clean uniform. I mean, it's really, it's stirring, and I do just want to thank you all for that if I don't get a chance to. Sir?
You know, we came here to talk about dropouts, and a lot of times we look at that as being at the high school level, and we come to the point where we're also talking about teachers dropping out as a result of some of these things. And when we look at both of those, a lot of times it seems to be that the people that are dropping out are feeling isolated from the rest of the group. And I know that, you know, we're trying to implement PLC so that we can collaborate on how to address
What's
those
PLC
kids.
for somebody who's
A
not
professional learning community. When we talk about collaboration, that seems to be one of the keys to being able to do that. It means we need time in class to be able to do it. It means we need funding to be able to alter our day. But one of the things that I'm finding is a real difficulty as we try to connect the kids to that is giving them purpose to what they're doing. I have kids today that are sitting there in front of me saying, dude, if I get my high school diploma, my dad's got one and he doesn't have a job. If you want me to get a high school diploma, what kind of jobs are going to get me? I got to go to college and it's going to cost me $90,000. I can't get in. I can't afford it.
Sure.
How are you all making your day-to-day relevancy and purpose economically and emotionally for your kids?
Omari, start with you.
Actually, this is a conversation that Paul has started in the green room. But how I make it relevant for the kids basically is, you know, I get that question. Am I ever going to use polynomials, you know, in real life? You know, I say, you know, if you're lucky, you will. You know, you know, I mean, because those STEM jobs that are out there, you know, they're out there because they're. I mean, not everyone can get them. You know, and they provide a great living. But I mean, just you know, but you know, even before you even get to that stage, I mean, the kids, you know, they're going to use those skills just to get to next level. You know, just making it through calculus can determine if you're going to stay in college. It's going to I mean, making it through algebra 2 is going to determine if you're going to stay in high school. So I mean, these skills that they're learning in middle school, they're relevant because, I mean, they're stepping stones, you know, and they need to realize that.
Paul, you were in that conversation. What else did you guys talk about?
Well, when we were discussing, and I think some of the things when we address specifically the college issue, there's a middle skill set, and a middle skill set's defined as education beyond a high school diploma. So first and foremost, when we look at that, everybody wants to automatically think that's a 4-year degree. That's not always the case. That middle skill set can be an associate's degree. It can be a certificate program. And my students at the technical campuses are able to earn national certifications. They're global. If they earn a certification in an IT area, information technology, or in a business area, so you have that stackable cert piece that's put together. And when we look at the area that the jobs are projected by Georgetown University, there was 18 million jobs, or 14 million jobs that are going to be available through 2018. And a lot of those are that middle skill set. And so we have to also embrace the fact that when we're working with these, it doesn't have to be that 4-year degree, you know, and that's really a key element that I think is missing, because we've moved so far over that anything less than a 4-year degree is a consolation prize at that point, you know, and that's not really what we need to do. When we look at some of those things, we need to focus on that and provide those opportunities. I'm in a very unique situation, but I think the part of it is career and technical education also needs to be part of that and solution. It's not either or, it's the and those are some things that are there, and yet not everybody's fully aware of what's available for our students. And serving as Michigan's Teacher of the Year, not only is it humbling to represent all of these people here, because there are people that do phenomenal things day in and day out. They go unnoticed by the public, they go unnoticed in their building by their administration or even their colleagues. Their students are the benefactor. That's what's important. But when we look at these areas of being able to provide these, I also feel that voice for CTE is important. Because
it's CTE?
Career Technical Education, thank you. And I think a lot of times, and we discussed this as well, it's labeled vocational education. Well, that's for somebody else. I don't believe that's the case. Our students earn academic credit, they earn 4th math, they earn their Algebra 2 at our campus, they can earn 12th grade English at our campus. So we've married the academics with making it relevant, and that's really what we've been talking about. Now it needs to lead to, this is a viable way for me to have a good living, raise a family, whatever dream we may have that we want to accomplish through the work world.
Don, you've done a little work on this too, right?
Absolutely. To piggyback off of what Paul was saying, I think that there is a devaluing of the vocational education, the career and tech. I'm a living example. I'm supporting a wife and 3 children off of a vocational education. My career is based off of a vocational education. But one of the resolutions that came from our broadcast said create options for create non-college options. And I think we have to remember that non-college options don't mean never college options. Because after going through vocation, after going through radio broadcast, it gave me the esteem to go back to college and earn my degree, come back and get my master's, and now I'm trying to consider the next level along the way. So that has to be an alternative that is placed in front of the children regularly as a viable alternative.
I had a kind of an informal question. This isn't a clicker poll, but how many of you are part of the Michigan Superintendent's Dropout Challenge? How, are your schools participating in? 2? Wow. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, as I've been explained, it's been up for about 2 years now, and they're targeting maybe 10 to 15 kids per building and trying to really do a full court press. And we saw a school yesterday, and the principal's right here out in Romeo, right? And it's pretty fascinating when you put that much attention and surround a kid with that much, that didn't necessarily cost you anything. It just cost these teachers some time. But the student was quite inspirational. I mean, she's really been through the ringer in her own personal life, but how she's responding to it. And the reason I bring that up is one of the things that you all said in your survey is that only 32% of you had any idea of how many students drop out of your school, and that there's actually there's a wealth of data. BetterHighSchools.org is a site that I came across yesterday that essentially lets you calculate based on the attendance, behavioral issues, core competency of your students, whether they're doing well or whether there's a red flag at them. So it's the data's out there. There is some support out there. I'm still kind of looking into the story. Go ahead, ma'am.
All right, me again, another question. There's the common phrase, it takes a village to raise a child. And my question for you as a panel is, how do you engage your village? So how can we as teachers get local school culture and community culture all on the same page and engage our community in our classrooms?
Start with you.
All right. To piggyback a little bit about your question, I think to think about all of our students as individuals and to not assume anything about our students, and to really start to see how no matter what culture we might place a person in or they might place themselves in, that every person has their own culture, that every family has their own traditions, or every person has their own things that they practice and believe in, and to be able to bring that into the classroom. So talking with parents and bringing parents, if you can, into the classroom, and if they can't come physically into the classroom, finding other ways to get parent involvement, whether that is maybe a parent reading a story or telling a story to a child who then can bring that into the classroom from a parent's perspective, through an email, through a phone call. It might not be that parent in the room, but it's still that spirit that a parent can still bring to the classroom, and celebrating within each child their own culture. And maybe it's not a greater culture of a bigger community than just your family or your friends or the people who live at your house, but how to build that within your classroom culture.
I mean, that's one of the questions we had on this card too. What are some methods we can use to equip families for the success of their children?
I think just as long as I spoke about it earlier, how we often forget that as a community, like both parents, teachers, and the larger community, we're all responsible for educating our children. So I think if all of us are open to working together and send the consistent message to our children, you know, we're with them from 8 to 3:30. If they're getting that consistent message when they go home, just as long as everyone's on board and they know that at the end of the day, we're all there to support the children so that they can work to their full potential.
Well, and I think when we do that, we talked a lot about culture, but it's a mindset. We have to have the proper mindset to move forward and do that. It's not, there's parents working 2-3 jobs that aren't going to be able to come in the room. We acknowledge that and we recognize that. But we as society also have to, and it has shifted, take responsibility when something is not going in the direction it is, and step up and try to help it, as opposed to turn the other way. And I think that's another issue that we're facing. We can go on for all kinds of examples where that's currently has occurred and continues to go on. But it's that mindset, if we're able to do that, what are they able to do? We see a lot of parent involvement at the elementary school, but it's typically around, you know, we're planning this activity or this party or these types of things are going on. And then we also move up and we say, well, we're going to try to let these 16, 17-year-old young people go. I mean, they're 16, 17. They're almost adults. They still need those parameters and those things that we're going to do with. So I think it's the mindset of we're all into this together, but we also have to act on that. We heard in some of the earlier stories today, maybe with the bullying.
Right.
You know, I'm not going to get involved with that because I know what this is all going to lead to. Well, you sometimes have to put yourself out there to get involved to do that if we're going to have that opportunity for those students.
Amari?
At University Prep Science and Math Middle School, we have these learning team meetings where it's the teacher's responsibility to actually get on the phone and call the parents and schedule parent-teacher conferences. And so if you don't reach a parent, try again. Don't reach a parent again, try again. Email blasts. So we also do presentations of learning where the parents are actually encouraged to come in and actually witness their child present what they're learning. So those are great opportunities, you know, to reach out and at this particular school, I mean, the teachers actually give out their cell phone numbers. I don't know many of the teachers here, they do that as well. I mean, but I have taught at a school where, you know, do not give out your cell phone number, you know, but it's really encouraged nowadays.
So what's the difference if a child is presenting when their parents are in the room versus when they're not?
Oh, well, it puts that responsibility piece back on the child, where they're looking at their parent's face, and either there's
everybody here knows this apparently. Okay.
Yeah. Either they're stuck like a deer in headlight, you know, or they're joyful because, hey, look, mom, dad, I know this material. Look at me, you know, look at me go, you know.
Okay. Ma'am?
A comment and a question for you. Comment, I'm from a small rural area, 2 hours north of Detroit, so it's amazing to to hear the issues because we've got the same things. The same things. It doesn't matter if it's a city or if it's in the rural area, the same things are happening. And I've been really amazed that no one has mentioned one other piece that we are dealing with, and that's the mandates coming from the state with testing. And so my question to you is that I know there's such a focus anymore that that's all we focus on is this test, and then we can't do the project-based learning, or there's just not enough time, or we don't think we're going to meet all those mandates. So how do you guys do that? How do you address all of the mandates that are coming down and still provide those wonderful opportunities for your students?
Start with you.
At our school, our students obviously take the MEEP, but our students also take MAP test as well as Scantron. And the good thing about both of those tests is they're adaptive to the learner. So, all of us could be taking the same test, but it adjusts to where we're at. So I could get a question wrong and the questions will start getting easier. He might get that same question right and the questions will get harder. So the reason we really like those are because we use those tests to drive our instructional practices. There are lots of tests that our kids are expected to take, and we can never take that data and use it to drive our instruction, but the MAP and the Scantron are great tools because they give us specific strengths and weaknesses for each individual kid. And then you can pull resources to meet each kid to fill in whatever gaps they have.
I think a big thing here that we've already talked about a little bit is teacher collaboration. And I see the mandates that are being placed on teachers and the constraints that has on what can be taught and the time that's used in the classroom. And that's where I think collaboration is huge, and where talking to veteran teachers, coming from a young teacher, what do veteran teachers do? And really opening that discussion of how can we fit all of these things into one. And as a young teacher, I don't know. And that's why I'm here, and I'm so glad that you brought up that question, because I'm looking to veteran teachers and mentor teachers to hear how they're doing that and opening up that dialogue with maybe a younger teacher that's struggling with that, or with just a fellow colleague that might be struggling, and having that discussion really for the betterment of our students.
Amari, how do you find the hours in the day to do all of it?
I teach. I ignore it. I don't ignore the data. The data's out there for a reason. It does guide my instruction when I'm looking at what they know, what they don't know. But the bottom line, when it comes down to it, I need my kids to walk out of my classroom with their heads up, because they know the material, or their heads down because they know they have to go back and revisit some things, But I mean, we have to teach, and standardized tests, they're a tool. You got to look at it as what it is. It's a tool. You can't be afraid of it.
Paul?
Well, I think too with the the standards, and we certainly have raised the bar, and that was one of the issues that were there. And then statistics, and I know we're talking about increasing graduation rate, lowering the dropout rate, and statistics show that one career and technical education class for every 2 academic brings in that hands-on and relative learning that's there. But as we are looking at the lay of the land and what needs to be covered to get there, I don't know that there's a lot of opportunity for that as we further develop and work with it. So I think there's still some things that need to be looked at and adjusted when we do that, because there are a lot of those mandates that are there and the standardized test. And as we look at this of what's demanded of the teachers, it's a daunting task to make sure that we hit that and make sure that we're getting the students where they need to be. And I don't know that there's any perfect solution, but I think the conversation still must continue. We've raised the bar, now it's there, one graduating class has already gone through it. Now let's look and see how are we going to meet some of these. Because as we talked about a lot of those things today, trying to be able to get to those projects is not an easy thing to do. But yet, that's where the students flourish and you engage them. So you're caught into that situation.
Sir?
I agree with the panel that learning is incremental. My concern is that how do we address the systematic concerns of things that are beyond the control or preview of the teachers, specifically like segregated schools? I also want to present Because if I have a problem, I should also have some type of a solution or some type of solution in mind for this, because I believe that we should start with the end in mind. For us in particular, being from a school that's 95 to 98% African American, I believe that one of the solutions for us is competition. To be able to actually see where we match up, because society as a whole believes that if you're an African American school or from Detroit, that things are very negative. And so your credentials and the belief is that you can't compete. How do you address that problem?
You know, one of the cards actually was mentioning about trying to, that very thing that he was talking about, trying to make sure that your school competes against other schools regionally, nationally, whether it's the Knowledge Bowl, whether it's Robot Wars, whatever it is. Have you guys seen that working?
I personally, at our school, we've seen it in the form of our Lego team competing. And I mean, if you see them during our Friday enrichment hours, you can just see them light up because they see the end goal. They're like, or even our chess team.
Yeah.
So that's where I've seen it prevalent.
Did sort of competitive spirit brings out the best in students, or what?
Absolutely, and I think, you know, I don't think that teachers are afraid of competition. I mean, people are welcoming that, and it's just a matter of letting some of those things there, but sometimes we're so defined by a lot of things that are out of your control, yet that is the only measuring stick that occurs. We could certainly here pass out cards and talk about success stories and do those things that are there, but that competition piece is one of the things where I think it unites people. And it unites the teachers and the students, because this is, we got to produce. I mean, I'm a business management, marketing, and technology instructor. I understand the business aspect of it. Your business will not flourish if we're not all pulling in the same direction. So that competition can be a unity piece too, as they're able to go through and work with it. And we talked about this in the green room. I'm also a high school coach. I think athletics, I think extracurricular activities are wonderful ways for young people to express themselves and learn. But until we go to the situation where we celebrate our academic successes to the level we do our athletic successes, we're not going to be on the same playing field. And I think that's a big issue.
Don?
I think the competition component is incredibly important. As a part of what I do, I travel around to a number of Detroit public schools, and I've seen the excitement level of the students who compete in subject matters that you wouldn't ordinarily think they would be very interested in. Case in point, Detroit School of Arts at one time had a fabulous debate team. If you'd walked into their classroom, it was littered with awards from all the different debates that they won. Both the male students and the female students walked around with a great deal of pride. And as extracurriculars and these kinds of things also serve, it was understood. If the subject matter wasn't, if you weren't taking care of your business in other subject matter areas, you weren't able to compete. So consequently, in the classes they didn't like, they still took care of the business at hand so they could stay on that debate team. Yep. It created a tremendous amount of pride, and I have to make this particular point relative to debate. A tremendous amount of pride for the African American kids who ordinarily get teased about speaking quote unquote white, but they knew they had to for the debate team. They erased that stereotype within the school.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that's about the amount of time that the internet will allow us, if you can believe that it will run out in another 15 seconds. But I just again want to thank our panelists, and thank you very much for joining this conversation. And I really hope that some of these tips that you'll see online are some things that you might be able to take to your classrooms, and perhaps somebody that's watching on the internet, or perhaps that somebody watched the program tonight also benefited from some of your comments and your thoughts. So thank you very much for being here.
American Graduate Teacher Town Halls are funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and are part of American Graduate Let's Make It Happen, a public media initiative made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.